Welcome to hashtag Webinar Wednesday. This time it's the Thursday edition. I'm Doug Sesserman, privileged to serve as the CEO of American Associates Ben-Gurion University of the Negev, and our job is to proudly raise awareness and resources for one of the most innovative universities in the entire world, and certainly a critical institution to the future of Israel. And today we have the pleasure of speaking with the president of Ben-Gurion University, Professor Daniellen Chamovitz. Before we get started, so welcome, Danny.
Thanks, Doug.
Before we get started, I just want to thank Melody Mokhtarian, our Director of Events and Experiences, and the team behind the scenes. Kara Bortman, we're live on Facebook, and Ronnie Strongen, the Chief Marketing Officer. For those of you who have joined us before, you understand this format. For those of you who are joining for the first time, thank you for being a participant. This webinar will last 30 minutes. Our goal is that if you give us 30 minutes, we'll give you insight into this phenomenal institution, Ben-Gurion University. So thank you so much. If you have a question, you just click on the Q&A function. I'll be able to read your question. In the last 10 minutes of the program, we're going to feed those questions to Danny. The first part of it will be a little bit more of a conversation. So with that, let's get going. So Professor Daniellen Chamovitz, or Danny as we refer to him as, began his tenure as president of Ben-Gurion University just 2 years ago. It's incredible.
Wow. Yeah.
He was formerly
It was the best of years, it was the worst of years.
Unbelievable. He was formerly the dean of the George S. Weiss Faculty of Life Sciences at Tel Aviv University. Danny is an internationally recognized activist for plant sciences. He is the author of the acclaimed popular science book, What a Plant Knows, which, by the way, has been translated into 18 languages. Congratulations. Professor Chamovitz is credited with the historic cloning of a gene involved in the biosynthesis of beta-carotene. Maybe you'll tell us more about that. He's from Aliquippa, Pennsylvania, which is just outside of Pittsburgh. Danny began his undergraduate studies at Columbia University, and after spending time abroad in Israel, he transferred to the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, where he went on to receive not only his first degree, but his PhD in genetics. He then did his postdoctoral research at Yale University. I think we've heard of that institution. Welcome, Professor Daniellen Chamovitz. So
Thanks,
let's just start, absolutely. Let's just start with the first question. How did a Jewish boy from Aliquippa end up making Aliyah and becoming the first and only American-born university president in Israel?
Well, if you grew up in Aliquippa, you'd make Aliyah also. That's the short answer. The longer answer is actually growing up in Aliquippa, where I was Aliquippa is halfway between Pittsburgh and West Virginia, a little bit north of Pittsburgh, northwest of Pittsburgh. I was the only Jew in my whole school district. There used to be a thriving Jewish community there when my father was growing up. But by the time I was in high school, I was the only Jew in the whole school district. But I was lucky, or maybe because of growing up in such an environment, the need for a Jewish identity is even larger. And so even though we're in this completely Goyish, Catholic town, very working class town, my mother was on the national board of Hadassah. My father was on the national board of United Synagogue, and there was a fight between them. Do I go to Young Judea or do I go to USY? My mom, of course, won, and so they sent me every summer to Young Judea camps. And from there, the line was pretty short to making Aliyah, to going first on a gap year program and then making Aliyah.
So you've told me before about that gap year when you were on Kibbutz Ketorah, and you had a bit of a eureka moment. Could you explain that to everybody?
Yeah, so this gets me closer to being president. So half of that year, I was on Kibbutz Keturah, which is at the southern end of the Negev Desert, more towards Eilat. This was in 1982, the end of the summer of 1982, just as the Lebanese War was going on. And because the war, the first Lebanese War, had just started, all of the Israelis our age had been sent up north for the war, which left us to really run the kibbutz to a certain extent. So I very quickly became promoted to tractor driver. Now, at the time, I was going to go to Columbia to be pre-med. My father's a physician. Everyone in my family is a physician, basically. My sister's a physician, 3 uncles, 2 cousins. And I was driving the tractor through the alfalfa fields. And I noticed that, every time I cut the alfalfa, then I had to come back and cut it again a couple of weeks later because it grows back. But when you cut wheat, it doesn't grow back. And I really knew nothing about plant genetics or plant biology, but had this eureka moment that if we could figure out why alfalfa grows back and maybe use that to make wheat that grows back, we can feed the world. And maybe that's at least as important as another physician in the family. And that was literally the moment I went from being pre-med to being pre-ag. I thought I would actually then end up working in the kibbutz in agriculture. But then there was a line that when I went back to Columbia, I found out that Columbia has no agriculture. Columbia doesn't have introduction to botany even. And that led to a longer road to down plant genetics, PhD and everything. But in the end, coming back to Ben-Gurion 2 years ago to be president is sort of the closing of the whole story. That if my Zionist dream started in the Negev, driving a tractor, and then through my entire academic career and building a reputation in food security and plant genetics, which maybe led to people at Ben-Gurion to ask me to apply for the job as president, and then coming back to leading this remarkable university, it sort of all is connected to what I did back in 1982.
Thank you. It's a great story, and it's great that you shared that with us. Let's talk a little bit about what attracted you to become the president of the university. It wasn't just that you got to be promoted to a new role, and there are only 8 university presidents, but you were happy in Tel Aviv. You were doing great.
Yeah, being president of a university in Israel isn't quite like being president of a university in the United States on a number of levels. There's only 8 university presidents, but on the other hand, it's not. You usually are promoted within your own university. It's not one of these things that people are positions that people are fighting over to get to for lots of reasons, including Israeli politics or people wanting to stay out of Israeli politics. But when I was approached for the job, to apply for the job, my initial response was, "What, are you crazy? Why would I want to do that? Why would I want to leave my lab?" But I have to give credit to my wife, actually. I went back and talked to her, who's also a professor at another college in Israel. And we talked about a number of things. And she said, she's the one who said to me, "Don't forget what brought you to Israel." And it was that statement that made me think that, what brought me to Israel was first wanting to feed the world and this idea of this, but it was also Zionism building the country. And it was clear to me that while I was a scientist, I was also building the country and I was doing important things for Israel. I still consider myself, I still have a lab, I'm still a scientist. But when I thought and learned about it more, it became clear to me that if I would be chosen to lead Ben-Gurion University, I would have a direct effect on the future of Israel. And the math is simple, because I got to look at a math point of view. If you buy into what the guy over your right shoulder, what David Ben-Gurion said, that the future of Israel is dependent on the Negev. And there's absolutely no doubt about it. Maybe it's taken a couple of decades, but the only place left, we are the future of Israel. But that the future of the Negev is truly dependent on Beersheba developing into a thriving multicultural metropolis and not being just an outlying sort of development town city. And that the development of Beersheba everything that's happened from high tech and culture is because of Ben-Gurion University. We're Beersheba's largest employer. And, and we're in the poorest neighborhoods of Beersheba. So if Beersheba is dependent on us, and the Negev is dependent on Beersheba, and Israel is dependent on the Negev, then the future of Israel is dependent on Ben-Gurion University. And that sounds rather bombastic, but the more and more you think about it, it's true.
Thank you. That's important. By the way, I just want to go back and remind the audience of something that you said earlier, which is that you listen to and are guided by the women in your life, both your mother and also your wife. So you're a good boy.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about what you were just saying, the relationship between the university and the region, in this case, Beersheba and then the Negev. Sometimes we think of BGU as the Stanford of Israel, because in Stanford's case, if you take Stanford out of Palo Alto, it's a nice place to live, but with Stanford, you have Silicon Valley. So people may not be fully familiar with the Innovation District project. Share a little bit in the IDF moving south. When you look into the future, is it really just a marketing line, or is it true that the future is dependent on BGU?
Thanks for putting it that way. It's definitely not just a marketing line. It's something we live every day. First of all, we see it in our students. When the students come to Ben-Gurion University, they identified as Ben-Gurionim, that they are Ben-Gurion. It's like you come to New York, you become a New Yorker. You don't become a Columbia student. You become a New Yorker. When you come to Ben-Gurion, you become a Ben-Gurioner. I can't say it in English the right way. You identify as—
I call it Ben-Gurionite.
A Ben-Gurionite, that's how you would say, thanks. And that is a way of thinking. And if you look around the university, and so much of what's happening, so for example, if we took the Israeli Defense Forces, over the past couple of years, several years ago, there was a strategic decision made to move all of the Israeli Defense Force bases from the center of the country to the south. And that includes the most advanced high-tech units, intelligence units in IDF. And those forces, those bases, are being relocated adjacent to the university. They're not being put in the middle of the desert. Why are they being put adjacent to the university? Because their commanders and then the higher up commanders understand that the interaction between the soldiers and the university is essential for Israel's security. And they want their soldiers to get degrees in electrical engineering or computer science or cyber engineering, or sometimes it's from the university, just like Ben-Gurion University also gives degrees, trains all of Israel's Air Force pilots. So
this is actually incredible, I think, for the audience to understand, because people are familiar, most people, that there's compulsory military service and that Israelis go to university after they serve in the army. But if you're in an elite unit, then you have a longer service. And what you're saying is, if you're in one of these elite units, whether you're an Air Force pilot or some of these intelligence units, you're getting your training from the IDF, but you're actually getting your degree from Ben-Gurion University.
From Ben-Gurion University. And so these IDF units moving south adjacent are thousands of officers who will then move with their families, which just changes the social economic standing of the whole area around Ben-Gurion University and throughout Beersheba. This is the building of the metropolis that we were talking about. And so then coming with it, then you need jobs become available also for the spouses, the husbands, wives, and people involved, and you completely change the ecosystem. So then around that, we were lucky enough, everything is timing. So I was really lucky when I became president. So that last February, it's actually amazing. It was the last in-person conference at Ben-Gurion University. Last February, we had an in-person conference where it was me, the mayor of Beersheba, and the director of Soroka Medical University Hospital, where we announced the establishment of Israel's Innovation District, which was, we were awarded a massive grant by the Prime Minister's office to develop Israel's Innovation District on the border between the hospital and the university, which would then have three mini innovation districts, one dealing with cybersecurity and data, one dealing with medical informatics, and one dealing with desert technologies. And growing around this will be an ecosystem of startups, of larger companies, of restaurants and bars, and of places for people to just walk around and see things. If you sort of imagine the area around Wash U in Seattle, in St. Louis, or the area around the University of Barcelona in Barcelona, it completely changes the neighborhood. Right behind, it's actually going to be right at your head on the map below you. There you go. It's going to, exactly at the conjuncture of the Advanced Technologies Park, the Marcus Family Campus, and the Yellow Faculty of Medicine. It's going to become a pedestrian mall where tourists are going to come to actually see what's going on. And
it's
without
amazing.
the university, this wouldn't have happened. And then technologies will come out of the university and be turned into startups staying in Beersheba.
So why was Beersheba chosen versus Jerusalem or Tel Aviv?
So we beat out Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, and Haifa on this because we are the only place in the country where you have a major university with every faculty at the same place, on the same campus, and a major hospital within what I call coffee distance. Coffee is the fuel of innovation. The ability for people from diverse fields to meet, to drink coffee and come up with ideas. And in no other university in Israel, and there are excellent universities in Israel, but in no university do you have that conjuncture. At Hebrew University, the Ein Kerem campus is completely separate from the Har HaTzofim campus and from the Givat Ram campus. At Tel Aviv, the hospitals are in Tel Aviv, but not on campus. At the Technion, the medical campus is on the bottom down near the sea, and the engineering campus is up on the hill. The two never meet. But because we have this physical meeting, the potential is that much larger.
Great. Talk for a minute about, the campus. By the way, to the audience, if you've been to Israel and you've never visited the Negev, you really haven't seen the future of Israel or one of its most remarkable geographic areas. But even if you've been to the Negev and you haven't spent time at BGU, you need to do that on the next trip, whether it's virtual or in person. We'd be happy to help arrange that. Danny, we also have two other campuses that are great also in their own way, right, both at Sde Boker and Eilat. Could you just speak to the work on those campuses and how it relates to the main
Let's work our way south to north. So we have a campus in Eilat, which is sort of like there's two different things going on in Eilat in general. One, there, of course, we have Sea Tech and Sea Technology because we don't really have an ocean in Beersheba, but in Eilat we do. And so there's a lot of very interesting work going on that in the Eilat campus. But the Eilat campus is also our accessibility campus. What do I mean our accessibility campus? You can be accepted to Eilat for engineering at a different, with
almost like a junior college, SAT. Right? Junior college, or?
Well, I don't want to call it a junior college. You can be accepted with a lower SAT score. You may have the exact same potential just because of where you grew up in. Like if you grew up in Aliquippa, your SATs might not be as high. And so you do your first year of engineering there in smaller classes, more personal attention. And if you pass the first year, you continue on to your second, third, and fourth years on the main campus. And what we've found is that those who succeed on their freshman year in Eilat, once they get into their second and third year, there's no difference in what their grades are. So awesome. It's a way of us, it's, there's this question, how do we make sure that we are nurturing excellence? And on the one hand, you have to have acceptance standards, but we all accept that these standards are subjective. And the Eilat campus is our playground, which allows people to prove themselves and then just go into the regular program and they succeed at the same level. It's a fabulous place. We also
Love it.
do hotel management there, because a lot of hotels in Eilat, right?
That's one of your top ranked programs from what I understand also.
Yeah, we're one of the top, I can't remember, top 50, top 20 in the world in hotel management. And soon we're going to have a hotel on campus, but we could talk about that if you
Yeah,
want.
you took the words out of my mouth. You're going to be the university president that's bringing the new hotel to Beersheba.
Yeah, anyone who's ever been in a hotel in Beersheba knows how important that is.
Okay, so go to Sde Boker.
Then we go north about an hour and a half and we get to our Sde Boker campus, which houses the Blaustein Institutes of Desert Research. This is a campus that's dedicated to energy research, solar energy research, water research, desert agriculture, and desert ecology. That's the view of the campus. This is a unique place in the world. It's an English language. Right now, it only gives master's and PhD degrees, all in English. People from, I think right now, there are 30 students from 35 countries studying there. And what we found now is that what we used to think is a local problem. These were founded, these institutes, by David Ben-Gurion to know how to live in the desert. But what we've learned, what is now clear, and especially with, the inauguration of Biden yesterday, is that was once a local problem of Israel of how to survive the heat, is now a global problem. How do we survive in a world of global climate change? And the world is turning to us for answers. It's really remarkable what's going on there. I mean, they've even developed a desert vineyard where we make wine with 2 centimeters of rain a year. It takes chutzpah to want to do that, but that's what we do. It's chutzpah.
You mentioned climate change, and necessity is the mother of invention. Ben-Gurion saw all this. Can you talk a little bit about? We talked about the 3 campuses, but shift a little bit to the research that the BGU does so uniquely well. You touched on some of this, but maybe start a little bit with the climate area.
Well, so it's really, I think what makes Ben-Gurion special is we do basic research on real world problems. Okay, this, all of our research, and we're not telling people to do that. It's sort of just ingrained in our DNA. So obviously in the field of climate change, how to deal the Blaustein Institutes are a prime example, but they're not the only example. In our engineering school faculty, we deal with issues of energy, smart cities, and cooling technologies, all necessary. Our School of Public Policy is looking at policy innovations to how to survive public change. And in the School of Public Health and in the Faculty of Medicine, they're dealing how does heat and dust affect human health. So all of these work together, as a very fascinating scientific problems with very clear implications. The same goes for cybersecurity. Israel houses the National Cybersecurity Center. I mean, not Israel, Beersheba, adjacent to the University National Cybersecurity Center. And our cybersecurity program is one of the top ranked in the world. But cybersecurity itself is not an academic field. Computer science and data science is the field. It's just that our researchers know how to apply that well across, all fields, even how cybersecurity affects healthcare. So for example, one of the things that was published coming out of Ben-Gurion, 2 things that were published the past year. One was how the 911 system in the United States can be taken down by a cyber terrorist with just a couple cell phones. And the other was how a cyber terrorist could take over an MRI machine. Now, why would that be at all dangerous? They could transplant artificial cancer into a patient. And so if you could imagine, the president of the United States goes in for a routine MRI and comes out that he has lung cancer. just because a cyber terrorist and the doctors couldn't tell that it was artificially implanted, you know. But this comes out of the basic research. Our autism center, you know, where we have people from both psychology and psychiatry and data science and genetics working together in the National Autism Center to understand both how to diagnose and how to, I don't want to use the word treat, it's not really the word treat, but how to work with children with autism in order to make their lives better. You know, so it's basic research on real world problems. You know,
fact,
even in the area of diplomacy and Christian Jewish relationships, you know, or that we house Amos Oz's archives, you know, Israeli literature, you know, but it's real, you know, everyone loves, you know, wants to read excellent literature. So we're doing real world fishing, you know, dealing with real world issues.
Yeah, just on that point, Daniellen Marcus, who you know well, and his family and her parents were so incredibly generous, and the largest gift ever to the state of Israel. She notes on the Q&A function, she just says hi because you send her a chat, but also she loves the line that you just shared, which is that BGU does basic research to solve real world problems. And that's unique in a way to our work versus the basic science you might see in other universities. Michael Ozer is also asking a question, Danny, about COVID, and you had initiated the task force.
COVID?
You know, it's hard for us in the States to be talking to you in Israel. We're very proud that.
No. We have 10,000 new cases a day in Israel. Yeah. While we're killing it with vaccinations, we're really losing it from the public health point of view. Don't get so excited about us.
Yeah. A silver lining, though, in all of this, and we're glad you're healthy, is how the university responded under your leadership with the task force. Yeah. So could you just explain a little bit about how you were able to pivot? You know, academicians aren't typically known for being that innovative, yet BGU is known as one of the top 50 universities in the world for entrepreneurship, and you were able to take COVID and turn it into an entire pivot from a research standpoint. Just explain how that happened.
I would like to say that this was an incredibly strategic decision on my part, but was more of a decision of panic. It was waking up on March, I have the date written down, I think it was March 11th. At the time, there were only 75 cases in Israel and 80,000 in the world, and we thought the sky was falling. We didn't realize that what it was going to get to. And I literally said, we got to do something. More out of panic than out of, and I wrote a letter to the entire university saying it behooves us to pivot our research to deal with this problem. Whoever is willing to join me in this, come tomorrow morning to my office. Let's talk about what we can do. And it's my responsibility to find you the resources to do it. And 60 researchers from 6 faculties showed up in the office. We had a 2 or 3 hour hackathon. A week and a half later, 2 weeks later, we had funded 24 research projects. And within 2 months, those research projects yielded 7 or 8 patents and 4 companies. You know, and some of them are still having a major effect on Israel and actually the world to this day. That actually all of the tests, not all, the majority of tests being done in Israel today are being done using a technology developed at BGU.
Incredible. We're starting to run out of time, Danny. We've held the audience really well. I'm going to keep you just for a couple of minutes. Let's just talk a little bit about the future, okay? I want to cover 2 more topics. One, just as you look into the future, the next 50 years, and we're not going to talk about the whole 50, but where do you see BGU going? And what does that mean to Israel and the world? Just with a couple of high levels, maybe the climate initiative, et cetera.
Sure. Well, BGU will evolve into Israel's leading university, the most important university. And that's because of a number of reasons and a number of opportunities. I talked about some of them, like the IDF. The second opportunity is this North Campus that we were lucky that there is a piece of land adjacent to the Marcus campus, which will double the size of the university, which will enable us to double our research output. We're the only university that has this capability, this capacity for growth. And this could be growth into new fields or who even knows in 25 years what the key things will be. But we have that flexibility. The second thing is that what the COVID taught us is that silos inhibit, and when you break down silos, you get incredible innovation. When we look across the campus right now, we identify at least 153 laboratories, research groups that are dealing with sustainability and climate change, each in their own independent department, which didn't always know how to work together. And now we've developed, under the leadership of the rector, a new academic program that has no boundaries, so that people can come and study with sustainability and climate change and take both public policy and biology and engineering and water studies, for example, within their degree. And then at the research point of view, we're building new research initiatives that are this problem-based approach like we did with COVID.
So let's just close, and I know we could keep talking for a long time, and maybe we'll bring you back for another one, and not too soon, but I know you've got to go. Let's talk about the diaspora and what it means to you. You know, when we speak, you sound American, but I know working with you, you're at least as much Israeli as you are American.
You don't have to say that.
And but still Pittsburgh Steelers fan. But I want you to talk about what it means for the diaspora to be involved with the university. And we had the remarkable SOS campaign to save the class of COVID-19. So just close maybe with some thoughts.
You know, as an American Jew with my entire family, most of my family still being in the States and friends in the States, you know, Israel does have a major role in the American Jewish identity, and I think it should have a larger one. We give a lot to the American Jewish community. The American Jewish community gives a lot back to us in terms of culture, in terms of identity, and in terms of challenging each other. What Ben-Gurion University provides, I think, is a venue, an idea, almost a Plutonian idea of Zionism in the modern world that we can all agree on and all identify with. That by supporting Ben-Gurion University, by ensuring its development and growth, we're supporting all that's good in Israel. You know, we didn't have time to talk about, you know, the socioeconomic status of the South, you know, that Ben-Gurion's role in integrating Bedouin into Israeli society. There's nothing to argue about at Ben-Gurion University. Well, we're Israeli, we can argue about anything. But, you know, in Beersheba. So for anyone who's concerned about the future of Israel, I think we are the place to be involved with. And we are the place to also feel good about. That's how I see it. And I see that in my friends when we meet, we talk about what I'm doing.
Wonderful. Well, I think on that, we're going to close the program, Danny. Thank you so much for joining us. President,
when can I come visit?
As soon as possible.
Yeah.
But thank you, Danny, for being Ben-Gurion University of the Negev's president, Professor Daniel Chamovitz. David Ben-Gurion, the founder and first prime minister of Israel, and the guy whose name is on the door of our university, once said that words without deeds are nothing. One must show by way of example. And Danny, we thank you for the example you show us in leading this great university and Israel into the future. I invite everybody to join us again on February the 3rd for our next webinar, where we will be talking about BGU in space, all the relationships between the great research at the university in remote sensing and satellite imaging and others with the UN to help with emergency preparedness and other issues globally. So join us then. Until February 3rd, be safe and stay healthy. Thank you very much.